Welcome back and moving on to our first segment of today. While talking about Egypt's keenness on establishing a balanced relation with all countries on all levels. Definitely we're talking about how important it is whether we're talking on the political level or the economic level. Here in the studio we have Dr. Hassan Wagih, Professor of International Negotiations. Hello, Doctor, and good morning.
Hello, good morning.
First of all, let me start by Egypt's relation with Russia. And actually, we can see different means of cooperation in all levels or in different levels. So let me start by talking about our relation with Russia and how important it is, and especially that we know that we have also the Russian invasion or all what is happening in Ukraine.
Yeah, actually, this is sad news. Egypt does not need any war anywhere in the world. We are trying to strike the balance between all friends and we have strategic relationships with the parties involved, by the way. So I think it is very important that diplomacy should be ultra complex diplomacy. No one should stop diplomacy because you know, let me tell you something about the Cuban Missile Crisis. When I was teaching this, I was focusing on the communication during the crisis. And there was a hotline was established between the Kremlin and the White House. Despite the fact of the gap in perception, the gap in interest, the misperception, it was so tough, and the world witnessed 13 days of turmoil, and really it was about to explode the entire planet. So I think when we are talking about nuclear negotiators and nuclear power, diplomacy should be at work. Like, for instance, I didn't like that a meeting was between the foreign minister of the United States and the Russian foreign minister was cancelled. Why? You should not cancel anything like that during a crisis. A crisis needs a great deal to stop repercussion, to stop what we call in crisis management, crisis slide. So I think Egyptian diplomacy is here to send a message for all the parties with the trending no war, no more wars, stop the war. But we have to have good communication between the parties. And I think that the zero-sum game is being played a long time ago, and there is historical roots for what's happening today. And when the Russians says they don't listen to us, yes, listening is a great problem. Good listening is very important. The Russians are requesting an integrated security plan. Why not? And you can do that, but you know, as Condoleezza Rice herself in an interview in CNN 2 days ago mentioned that the agreement between Putin and James Baker a long time ago, that when we have independent countries, no problem. But he said no missiles to be put in this, because this is jeopardizing the Russian security. Of course, if I have something threatening my border, yes, and it was agreed upon. So the missiles are there. The missile should be drawn, and I think that I heard Trump saying yesterday that Putin is a savvy guy, very well organized in his thinking, and he wanted to have his country, and he has some historical roots for this problem. We have to listen well to all the parties, to him and to the European party. But to get into the exchange of zero-sum game is not the right way to deal this crisis, because I'm a world citizen. I have a say in it. Everyone has a say in it because it jeopardizes the entire security of the entire world. So we need much more diplomacy. We need much more. We don't have to say that false flag, and sanctions. These are not the words that intended to de-escalate. We need some good de-escalation to take place between the two parties, all the parties. And Egypt really, voice is very clear in this. Establish the balance, we don't need wars. but we need ultra-complex diplomacy.
Sir, also there were talks in the Egyptian cabinet, and we were talking even before the air, talking about how now we are really, really living in a global village.
Yes.
And anything that will happen anywhere in the world will have its impact on us. And there were talks how Egypt can contain the situation. It might affect some of the basic commodities prices, and Egypt is ready for this. And all of these important points. Your comment?
Yes, of course, and as you have already mentioned, global village. They didn't launch the term global city because village in villages, people know each other much more better. They are much more interconnected. So I think it is really a global village now. What could happen in any part of the world has impact and repercussion on the entire world, especially when it comes to the war and peace issues, big issues like the one that we are witnessing these days. So I think that, yes, I have witnessed that in COVID. We have witnessed that in the financial crisis 2008 and 2000. And yes, we have many global crises that impact the entire world. And what's happening in Ukraine and Russia now could jeopardize the production in so many parts of the world, and could impact prices, and could impact, and I hope that there should be hard work for diplomats to make a stop on this war. No more wars. This is the trending that Egypt is raising.
I think moving on to Egypt, and we can all see that from day one, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi was always keen to build this, let's say, balanced relation with all countries on all levels. And definitely this have a great and clear impact on Egypt, whether we're talking about the political level or the economic level. And now we can see that they are both linked together. Both must move together or be parallel to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is a very important orientation, and Egypt is a problem, is a very, very existential problem, like the one that is taking place now with the Ethiopian dam. Egypt has exhausted all possible diplomatic avenues. Egypt doesn't mind that our brothers in Ethiopia develop their country, and Egypt offered help in that. But it shows that the Egyptian leadership wants to have a balanced relationship. War is something that will never solve the problems effectively as diplomacy and good relations. So I think here again we need to build up the Arab system again, and I think the visits, the exchange of visits. Tabun, who is hosting an Arab summit in March this coming month, is very needed to establish this Arab system, because there is a liquidity in the international system these days, and we have to know what can we do as an Arab system dealing with regional powers. You know, as I've already mentioned a long time ago, you know, we need to have this with Turkey, Iran, and the Arab system should meet together to galvanize the entire area against terrorism and against wars, and to help the peoples of these countries to develop and build development on a larger scale.
Also, to include talking about the Arab countries and the role of Egypt and keenness to establish this balanced relation. We achieved a lot actually with the Gulf countries in particular and its impact on the region. When we talk about the Arab region, I'll also include the African countries as well, because definitely there is an interaction, whether we're talking again on the political or the economic level.
Yes, I think the African continent is very rich with all the resources, and if we all together get together to use these resources for the development, not for disputes and for fights, and it's not only a matter of fight among countries, African countries. Africa became an ambitious place for foreign interventions. We have foreign interventions of all kinds, with all powers.
Due to the potentialities in the continent.
Of course. So if we do not move in the Arab system to build it, someone would intervene. If we do not move effectively in the African continent, someone else would intervene and try to pursue his own agenda, which usually and maybe in a very contrastive edge with our interest.
If we're talking about the importance of having such a balanced relation, from your own point of view, tell us more about how important it is and its impact when it comes to different means of cooperation among countries.
Of course, we have to have modalities. And one of the important modalities is the African Union, supposedly. And and also if you can see now that there should be, when we are talking about, would lead us to internationalization. Internationalization is needed on several levels, on the state level, and also through NGOs, through business people, through investment, through a chain of actors. It's no longer one actor is doing the job, because no one actor can do achieve all these big agendas that we are supposed to have to exploit our resources in the best of manners.
Right. Also, we can see due to the meeting between Egypt and Kuwait, talking about the stability in the region as well. Again, this back to the idea of the cooperation between Egypt and all of the Arab countries to face all the challenges we are facing in the region, as you mentioned now. And definitely we have the COVID, one of the challenges, not only in the Arab region, but in the whole world. And we can see this, especially its impact on the economy in general. But again, we can see how Egypt managed to confront this important part when it comes to the economic growth in Egypt, and how we were able to hold on and to contain this important challenge.
Yeah, there was a choice either to close or to open up for the economy to develop, or to take a balanced procedure. And I think Egypt succeeded in taking these balanced procedures, and I think that now, if you look at what is happening in Canada and what is happening in some other European countries, there are demonstrations, and if you look at the media, you can find like revolutions over there to get rid of this restriction regarding the COVID repercussion, because the restrictions are really closing the economy for those people. Egypt model is different when it comes to having this balanced view of having taking care but opening up the economy. So I think the world in Canada, the situation in Canada, I think is very unbelievable, and as if there were a revolution. And in some other European countries, we have seen also demonstrations along the same lines.
Right, and also Egypt was keen in strengthening, and of course we have a deeply rooted relation with Saudi Arabia, and especially now we have some important files in the region, and Egypt is keen to sit with different sides to tackle this importance of whether we're talking about the Libyan file or other files in the region that is not again affecting the country that has the issue, but of course affecting the whole region as well.
I think that bilateral relationship and the visits of the president and the visits of many presidents, and we have seen the Algerian president last month. I think it is very important not to leave the summit, the Arab summit, as it is in its time. I think that we should
a little bit earlier.
A little bit earlier, because really we have to have a say in what's taking place, either when we look at the entire international system and the liquidity and what way the Arab system should go there, and also regarding this global crisis, which really needs a great deal of diplomacy from all parts of the world.
We have seen this during the visits of President El-Sisi to several countries and the different countries, moving on from Asia to China to Europe to all these countries, to Hungary, to Greece, all these countries. And now we can see how important all these visits are, because this is paving the way for more to come after.
Yes, of course. As I've mentioned, the word diplomacy and effective diplomacy and ultra complex diplomacy. It needs moves, it needs face-to-face communication. You cannot sit in your place and sending messages. You have to meet and you have to open up the situation for these direct negotiations with other. You know, we have been prevented from this because of the COVID, okay? But we have to break that, especially when it comes to leadership. So the president is moving around for meeting people face-to-face in a face-to-face communication, which is, of course, when you have a face-to-face communication, you have communication. But when you have other means of communication, it is less of an impact.
When we have leaders' communication, definitely it is on a different level.
Of course.
What is next and what is supposed to be done after such important visits? I'm talking now about officials. Sometimes I talk about citizens themselves, because everyone has a role, whether we're talking about public sector, private sector, all these sectors, each sector has a role to be played.
Of course, you're right, absolutely right. As I've told you, the internationalization process is, when it comes to formal track one diplomacy, and also much of internationalization takes place in track two diplomacy. And when we are talking about track two diplomacy, we are talking about the media, we are talking about education, we are talking about NGOs, we are talking about investments. So I think it is extremely important that we have the two sides, track one diplomacy plus track two diplomacy. They together could do the job. One track is working and the other one is not working. Here, there is no achievement of the interest that we really seeking to achieve.
I'm talking also about the diversification, and the word diversification on its own, how important it is when it comes, whether we're talking about our economic relations or our sources.
Yes, of course. You mentioned something very important about diversification. I mean, this is very important when it comes to establishing trust among countries. And I think if we understand the deep meaning of diversification, we would have achieved, for instance, Arab economic unity. For instance, if we export some kind of goods and Morocco is doing the same thing, and if we specialize in one thing, and Morocco in one thing, and Saudi Arabia in another thing, and there is this diversification which creates integration, and also this is you know, we have three types when it comes to negotiation, three types of trust: calculus-based trust, behavioral-based trust, and identification-based trust. You know, calculus-based trust is that you trust in your calculations in diversification, okay? How to deploy these diversified situations. Like the example I gave you, if I export a given item and my competitor is another Arab country in that market, let us either to give it to him, to be responsible for it, and I am responsible for another thing. I am textile, Saudi Arabia chemical productions, Morocco orange. I mean, call it whatever. I mean, it needs a very good round table to see who is supposed to be
the competitive advantage of each one.
This is what the European Union was successful in achieving. Is that economic? You know, the European Union had witnessed the two world wars and over 20 million dead. Yes. But they did not start. My point is that you should not start with identification ground. Start with calculus-based trust, understand the behavior of other, and try to be sensitive to it. Here you would reach identification ground. But if you start like we have been doing in the Arab world, You have to be like me. Either you are like me or not. I follow this agenda, you have to follow the same agenda. There is no diversification and orchestration of different moves that would end up by having richer entities and richer way to get to the targets that we would like to achieve.
Right. So, well, definitely, Dr. Hassan Wagih, Professor of International Negotiations, thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Right, moving on to a quick break, then we'll be back with more on The Breakfast Show.